So now for the final parts, we want to display the leaderboard and we want it to be displayed sorted. So there's not actually much code here to get this, but some of it's complex. Now we know that the display leaderboard part's fine, it's being called, so I'm just going to comment out that first line. Now we need an array to store the usernames that are being read in, so set equal to a blank array. And we need one to store the user points. I'm going to call that user points blank array. Now, similar to the file read and write we did earlier, and the exact same idea again, we want to open a file. I'm just going to refer to it as file. And I want to open the scoreboard.csv file. And I want to open it for read-only mode because we don't need to edit anything. We're just going to save data into it. And the exact same as we did before, I'd just like to get the raw data from the file.readLines function. Now after that, I have read everything I need, so I can do file.close. And that's the file reading part complete. Exact same almost before for index and range from the length of the raw data. So that's identical code for the other file read, just looping around for every line of code that's in that file. Like last time, we want to take one row, so split data equals the raw data at the current index position dot split on the comma delimiter, and careful not to mess that up. So if we print out the split data each time here just to test it's working, split data function 5. Why isn't that running? Not helpful. That's because it's below my window, that's why. So it is running, so if we enter choice 2 to display leaderboard, you can see that even the last tests people we put in are being displayed and split up per row, so it's nearly done already. So delete the split data. Storing the data in the correct arrays is the exact same, well, almost the exact same as we did before. So I'm just going to go and steal one of these lines of code just to speed it up. It's code reuse, so it's quite a good idea to do that. So we can see that the first part refers to the name of the array that we're going to store the data in. So that'll be usernames, dot append the split data at position 0, which will be the first piece, and then the second piece will be the user scores. I believe, let's just test our user points, so I've got to be really careful, don't make little silly errors there. User points, and that's at position index 1, so always increasing. Now, we're going to use the bubble sort to sort it, so I'll come back to that in a second. You might want to try coding that yourself if you've seen it before. What I'll just do is I'll get it to display first. So we can see we've got this nice header format that's called, so let's see exactly what this looks like at the minute. When we use choice 2 to display the leaderboard, we can see that we've got the username appearing and then this space before the score. So to display the actual leaderboard, we want to loop, and we want to start at 0 to the length of the usernames list, and because we've got that nice header code already, we can copy it again and paste it in here. Now let me just run that to show you why I'm copy pasting it. So when we display it, you can see that we've got the header and then the header lots of times underneath it, but they're all lined up neatly underneath the comments before it. Now we don't want username and score to appear there every time. We want it to be a different item, something that changes. What we want to display is the user names, and we want the user points to be displayed. Now, if I left it as it is here, it would display the full array every time. We want to be specific about each individual position. So, we want to display the one at the current index in the loop, and again, user points at the index of the current loop. So now, when we run that, and we get the leaderboard to be displayed, you can see that it displays them exactly as is in the CSV file. Now you can see that this really long name's messing up the formatting. I can fix that by changing the numbers between the tabs here and making it longer if needs be. So I'll change that just to see the effects, and I'll probably need to change one other number as well, changing this one to 15 and running again. Display leaderboard, and again still messed up, so I'd need to mess around with the numbers to get that fixed. What I'm just going to do is just change the CSV file name just quickly, scoreboard, just to shorten that name because it's obviously quite silly. So save that, and when we run it this time, display leaderboard, you can see it looks much neater when it's not got all those ridiculous extra characters. So now to the swap part. Now the first part here, there's no code for this. This is just to show that we're using the bubble sort. So I really hope you're able to explain the bubble sort. It is really straightforward. We have a loop, I'm going to call outer, that starts from the first item to the end of it, but one position back. Now the reason it finishes off one position back is because the next comparison compares the current one and the next one. So if you went to the very final position in the list and tried to compare it to the next one, we would get an out of bounds exception because there's an index, the length plus 1 doesn't exist in an array, so we have to come back one position. Now the inner loop does the exact same thing, and it's the one that does the comparison. So for inner in range 0 to the length of user points, now I'm using user points because that's what dictates whether someone's moved or not. So it's this inner loop that's going to do the comparison. Now we're only going to swap if the user points at the current index position is less than the user points at the next position along, which is index plus 1. So if you can think about it, if the user points was 9 and this index plus 1 was 10, those would have to swap because the person next in the list actually has a better score. So we use the less than to get it into descending order. Now, if you remember earlier when we read these, read the data in, they were all strings. So we're going to have to cast those to integers to actually carry out that comparison. Now, this is one piece that we can simplify eventually when we use records. But swapping is really simple when you think about it. What we've got to do is free up a space in the array that we want to put it. So we use a temporary variable to hold the user points at the current value. Okay, so we make a copy of whatever the current points is, which means we could then change that. So if we then say user points equals, or sorry, user points at index equals user points at index plus 1. So what that's done is it's taken a copy of the current one, it has moved the next one into the current position, and then we can move into the next position along the temp value. So that's a long way round of swapping them. Now there is an easier way in Python to do that, but I want us to understand how it is done really behind the scenes. Now, it doesn't swap the usernames automatically just because you swap the user points. So if we run it now and see what happens when we display the leaderboard, index +1. Now the reason for that is because I've made a mistake here. It should be inner for all of these rather than index. Too used to using the index, so inner. And again, I've made some of them wrong here and some of them not. So it should say inner for all of these because index is not actually any variable of use for this loop. So if we test it again, this time with the correct name, display the leaderboard, you can see that it's filtered Colin to the top with 9 points and Felix has 6, Colin has 1. But if we check the CSV file this time and open the scoreboard, you'll see that that doesn't match up because Colin has 8 points and it should be Ella with 9 points and Felix with 9 points at the top. And the reason that's happening is because we haven't swapped the usernames over. Now, I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video because I'm hoping that you're intelligent enough to use this part to do that. And when you've done that, that is the program complete. And the only way they can make your final coursework more complex than this is by adding more functions that you need. So we could have a function to search for a particular user. Really easy to do that. We would go and add in another else function, else call here. We would add in another function call. This is as complex as it can really get, apart from us having to add in 2D arrays and record structures, which I'll do another follow-up video to show you how to use a record structure. So go ahead and get that working, get the sort part working completely, and see what extra features you can then add in for me.